You always did like attention, my mother once said, flipping through one of my military awards. I guess the army just gave you better costumes. My name is Evelyn Rowe. I spent 23 years in uniform, led missions that most people couldn't stomach reading about, but here I was, just Evelyn again, the one who left. I carried that sentence with me longer than any dog tag. It wrapped around my spine like armor I never asked for. Standing at the edge of this room full of small-town pride and smaller minds, I felt it echo again one last time before I walked into the fire. My boots clicked softly against the polished floor of the Hawthorne room, Everest's idea of elegance, all gold trim and candlelight and enough pretense to choke someone. I hadn't been home in nearly 2 decades, but the smell of clove ham and rich people perfume hit me like I'd never left. I paused at the entrance, straightened the lapels of my navy blue dress, and walked in alone. Every head turned, then just as quickly they turned away. Monica stood at the center of it all, in crimson heels and a laugh rehearsed for the crowd. My mother sat beside her, cheeks taut from too much effort, hands folded like a sermon was about to begin. My father gave me a nod, the kind that said, "Don't make this difficult." It was the same look he'd given me at 13, when I'd come home with a busted lip and refused to explain it. "Oh, look who decided to show up," Monica said, raising her wine glass with a smirk that glittered like the chandeliers. A few guests chuckled. Her husband, Chase, whispered something about honorably discharged from basic kindness. I said nothing. I didn't flinch. I walked toward the table. There was no seat waiting for me, not even a coat draped over one to signal someone cared enough to save a place. Just one chair remained at the far end, next to the swinging kitchen doors. I sat down alone, the scent of dish soap and burnt garlic brushing past me every time the doors flapped open. Nobody asked how I'd been. Nobody asked who the little girl beside me was. Lena, 9 years old, sat tall in her simple white dress, thick curls tied back neatly. She held my hand under the table. "Are we early?" she asked, her voice small. "No," I whispered, squeezing gently. "We're just different." A cousin across the table leaned toward his date and muttered, "I didn't know Evelyn had a kid or a husband." His date laughed. "I didn't know Evelyn had feelings." More laughter. I sipped my water. Lena looked at me, confused. "Why are they laughing?" I smiled at her, lips tight. "Because sometimes people laugh when they don't understand courage." The seat beside me scraped loudly. My great-aunt Beverly settled in, adjusting her pearls. She peered at Lena. "Your niece?" "My daughter," I said evenly. Beverly raised her brows, gave a tight smile. "Oh, that's modern. That's life." I said nothing. Lena looked down, tugging at the edge of the tablecloth. I leaned closer and whispered, "You don't need to fold yourself smaller to fit their frame." She nodded bravely. Someone clinked a fork against a glass. My mother stood, her voice ringing clear and proud as she praised Monica's nonprofit, celebrated my cousin's med school acceptance, and toasted a 5-year-old spelling bee win. She didn't mention the daughter who once led combat rescue missions through night fire zones. She didn't mention the medals or the Valor Cross I received with my ribs broken and boots blood-stained. I lifted my glass anyway. My father raised his toward Monica and said, "To the one who stayed." The whole table followed. My name wasn't spoken once. "You really thought this would be a good idea?" Monica leaned down beside me, her voice sugar-wrapped acid. "Showing up here with your accessory," she motioned toward Lena with her wine glass. "Mom didn't want the vibe to feel overshadowed by you in your little military cosplay." That she didn't finish. I turned to her, not a word, just a stare. This was the same girl who once cried when I left for basic training, then never wrote. The one who wore my boots as a joke to a Halloween party while I was sleeping in foxholes. She smiled wider. What is it? Nothing to say? I smiled back, colder. Not everything deserves a reply. She flinched, just a flicker, and walked away. Lena leaned into my side. Why does she talk like that? Because some people build their house on sand, and hate the ones who learn to survive storms. Dessert was served. I picked at mine, appetite gone. A few people passed by, greeting Monica like royalty. Nobody noticed me, or maybe they did and chose not to. Just when the room had returned to its dull hum of cutlery and curated small talk, a voice cut through the air, clear, firm, unmistakably military. Mum, it said. I turned. A young officer in full dress uniform stood at attention beside our table. He looked past Monica, past my mother, directly at me. Major General Rowe, he said, welcome home. Silence fell like a curtain. Monica froze. A fork dropped somewhere near the kitchen doors. A busboy stopped mid-step. Private Harper. I nodded. He snapped a crisp salute, and added, hello, Private Button, his eyes twinkling at Lena. Her face lit up. Uncle Jay, she whispered, standing. The officer bent slightly, touching her shoulder. Good to see you again, soldier. In that moment, the entire room learned what the military already knew. This wasn't shame I brought back, it was legacy. But that silence didn't follow us home. That night, in the cheap motel off Route 8, Lena curled up next to me, whispering, I liked the part when he called me soldier. I kissed her hair. That's because you are one. She fell asleep fast, breath steady, peaceful. I stared at the ceiling. My rib twinged, a scar that never fully healed. Somewhere inside that ache lived a memory I never wanted to revisit, but it stirred anyway. Kandahar, 2011. The kind of mission that doesn't make it into newsreels or bedtime stories. 2 convoys down, ambushed in a valley that felt like the end of the world. Radio silence, broken only by screams and the static that sounds too much like breathing when you're trying not to die. I crawled through blood-soaked sand and bullet-whistled air to reach a sergeant bleeding out from his femoral artery. He gasped, I ruined your boots. They're standard issue, I told him. You're not, he laughed, choked, apologized again. I held his hand until it stopped shaking, then stood up, wrist fractured, vision swimming, and still gave the next order, because no one else could. That night, when the medevac finally took off, I didn't cry. Not when mortar fire nearly collapsed our tent. Not when they zipped up 3 of my men into body bags with the same quiet efficiency they used for supply crates. But that boy's hand, that stayed. Months later, in a hospital bed with wires in my chest and morphine in my veins, I got a single card. Not from my parents, not from my sister, a private in Bravo company wrote, you held the line for us. We saw you. 5 words, but they did more than any medal. No one from home called. Not even when I made the paper, General Rowe leads civilian rescue in fire zone. The article used a photo of someone else, no one noticed. I signed my discharge papers with my left hand, alone. That was the day I stopped expecting applause. Then Lena happened. It was the tail end of monsoon season in Djibouti. We were rotating back from an op, half the unit still covered in mud, half in mosquito bites, when we found her on the steps of the barracks, faded blue blanket, no note, no sound, just a pair of brown eyes wide and unblinking, like she'd already lived through too much to bother crying. I was the ranking officer. Protocol said call local authorities, but I looked down and she looked up, and I swear something passed between us that outranked everything I knew. I picked her up. "You're safe," I said. She blinked once, that was it. No paperwork, no questions. She was mine, not by blood, but by decision. The platoon became her village. The mess cook warmed milk for her before he made coffee for the rest of us. Vega, the guy who could break down a rifle in under 9 seconds, learned how to braid her hair. She learned to walk in boots 2 sizes too big, wore camo like it was second skin, and knew every soldier's name by heart. But she only ever called one person Ma, and that was me. When she had nightmares, she crawled into my cot. When she had her first fever, I sat up 3 nights with her while a sandstorm rattled the windows. No one from my family ever knew, not because I was hiding her, but because they never called. They didn't ask if I was okay. They didn't ask if I had someone. They saw a line on a military bulletin, wrote commended for humanitarian action, and forwarded it like a coupon they didn't intend to use. Lena didn't know her birthday, so we picked one together, the day she was found. Every year, I baked her a cake out of MRE packets and heat tabs. One year, Sergeant Miles carved her name into an old Kevlar helmet. Another, Private Button's first combat crown. My phone lit up with a message from Grandma Eleanor. "Remember, my brave girl, diamonds are made under pressure. You're already shining." I stared at those words for a long time, then wiped my tears, grabbed a notebook, and mapped out a daily schedule, every hour, every minute, classes, work shifts, study sessions, meals. There wouldn't be much sleep, no time for parties or socializing, but I would make it work. That first week on campus, the financial aid office became my second home. Miss Winters, the assistant director, sat me down after hearing my story. "You're taking on a lot," she said seriously. "But I've seen students like you make it. Just promise me you'll come talk to me before it gets overwhelming." That promise would end up saving me more times than I could count. The day before classes started, I got a call from Mrs. Chen. "We scraped together one more small scholarship," she said. "The teachers pitched in. It's only $1,000, but we all believe in you, Emma." I stared at the check and burst into tears, not because of the money, but because someone finally saw me. Someone finally said, "You matter." And that was the final push I needed. I was going to do this no matter what. Freshman year came at me like a tidal wave. While most students were figuring out the best parties or how to balance Netflix with studying, I was working 2 jobs, living off instant noodles, and stretching every dollar like it was elastic. My day started at 5 a.m. with a study session. Then I'd open the coffee shop at 6:30, rush to classes and take notes like my life depended on it, then clock into my second job at the bookstore by 5 p.m. By the time I got home, it was usually past midnight. Sleep became optional. I learned to speed read during bus rides, listen to recorded lectures while mopping floors, and squeeze in homework during slow customer hours. Every second had a purpose. I didn't have the luxury of wasting time, not when every paycheck, every grade, every completed assignment meant one step closer to surviving the semester. Meanwhile, Lily was living the full college fantasy. Through texts and social media, I saw glimpses of her life: sorority mixers, weekends back home, study abroad meetings, brunches with friends. It was like we were in 2 completely different worlds, even though we attended the same university. There were nights I'd see her tagged in another party photo while I sat at my kitchen table, doing homework by broken lamplight with a cup of stale coffee. Yeah, I was bitter, I won't lie, but something amazing started to happen that I didn't expect. I began crushing it in my business classes. While other students struggled to understand accounting concepts or marketing principles, I was already living them. Budgeting was my daily reality just to make rent, time management was a master's degree I earned before stepping foot on campus. One day, Professor Bennett, my business ethics professor, stopped me after class. "Ms. Wilson, your analysis of the resource allocation case study was exceptional. You've got a unique perspective, mature, lived." That compliment meant more than she probably realized, because for the first time in a long time, I felt like my struggles were giving me an edge. Around that time, I also met someone who would become my lifeline, my roommate, Zoe. She was quiet at first, always with headphones on, always cooking something amazing that made our apartment smell like heaven. I guess she noticed how little I was eating and how exhausted I looked. One night, she just left a Tupperware container with my name on it in the fridge. I came home after a 12-hour day, opened the fridge, and found real food, pasta, vegetables, and a handwritten note that said, "Eat this, then sleep." I almost cried. That kind of kindness, when you're hanging on by a thread, is everything. Eventually, Zoe and I got closer. One night, I came home looking like I'd been run over by midterms, and she sat me down. "You can't keep doing this to yourself," she said firmly, handing me a cup of tea. "You're going to burn out hard." When I told her my story, about the loans, the jobs, the no help from my parents, she just stared at me, stunned. "That's beyond unfair," she said. "From now on, you've got a new college family, me." And she meant it. Zoe became my rock. She made sure I ate, helped me edit papers when I was too tired to form coherent sentences, even kicked out other roommates when I needed quiet to study. "My parents taught me that family looks out for each other," she said, "and sometimes the family you choose is better than the one you're born into." Fast forward to sophomore year, and things got even more intense. The coffee shop slashed hours, seasonal slowdown, they said, and just like that, 40% of my income vanished. Rent was due, tuition payments were coming. I felt panic rising like a tide I couldn't stop. I remembered Ms. Winters from financial aid and practically sprinted to her office. I poured out my situation in every painful detail. She nodded, looked through my file, and then said something that gave me actual hope. "You qualify for an emergency grant, and Professor Bennett recommended you for a research assistant role. It pays better than the coffee shop, and hours are flexible, too." That job was a total game changer. Working with Professor Bennett, I helped research small business resilience during economic downturns. Not only was it intellectually stimulating, but it felt like the first time I wasn't just surviving, I was building something. One afternoon she asked, "Have you ever considered starting your own business, Emma? Your ideas on innovation under pressure are advanced." That planted a seed that had been buried since high school. That night, I pulled out my old notes, business competition ideas, sketches, and plans. What if I created something now, while still in college? I used what I was learning in class and on the job to launch a small online platform offering virtual assistant services to local businesses. I built a website, created service packages, and started emailing every small company I could find. The first client came in 2 weeks later, then another, and then a third. By the start of junior year, I was running a side hustle that made more than my bookstore job. I kept the research assistant gig for mentorship, but I was finally able to quit the bookstore. Every dollar from the business went toward tuition, rent, and groceries. I still had loans, but the weight on my shoulders was lighter. Something else happened, too. I started raising my hand in class, sharing insights from my real-life experience. Professors noticed, students started asking me for help with projects. For the first time, I didn't feel like the invisible sister or the afterthought, I felt seen. By the end of junior year, my digital assistant business had become something real, not just a hustle to cover bills but a legitimate operation. I had a steady roster of clients, local businesses needing help organizing schedules, handling emails, and managing basic social media. I hired 2 classmates for my marketing seminar, paid them well, trained them myself, and watched my little business grow into something with real momentum. My apartment was still a mess most days, and I still lived off ramen more than I wanted to admit, but I was building something I could own, something that nobody, especially not my parents, could take credit for. I'll never forget the day Professor Bennett pulled me aside after class. "Emma," she said in that no-nonsense tone she used when she meant business, "I've nominated you for the Entrepreneurial Excellence Scholarship. It's full tuition for your senior year, based on everything you've built and your grades. You've earned it." A few weeks later, I got the letter, a 0 balance for senior year. I reread that email 5 times, not just for the numbers but because it meant something deeper. I had made it to my final year. Debt was mounting but manageable, my business was thriving, and I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. Meanwhile, Lily, whom I barely saw except in the occasional family group chat or Instagram story, was starting to wobble. She'd always been the golden child, the one with the shiny future, but now, faced with her senior thesis, something changed. One evening in November, I came home from the coffee shop to find someone knocking at my apartment door. There she was, Lily, makeup smudged, laptop in one hand, a stack of half-finished papers in the other. "I'm failing my senior seminar," she blurted. "My professor says my research is a disaster. I don't even know where to start, Emma. I need help." I just stared at her. Part of me wanted to shut the door, let her figure it out the way I had, no handouts, no favors, just grit. But I didn't, because even though I remembered every Christmas she got the good gifts, every college tour I wasn't invited to, every dinner where her stories got attention and mine got silence, she was still my sister. And deep down, I could see she wasn't just failing a class, she was falling apart. So I opened the door wider and said, "Come in." That night turned into the first of many. We worked through her papers. I showed her how to structure a research argument, organize citations, and build methodology. She was smart, she just never had to push herself before. For the first time, we actually talked. "How do you do it?" she asked one night, eyes wide as I highlighted half her notes and rewrote her thesis outline. "Do what?" "All of it, the business, the grades, the jobs. I can barely keep up with my classes and I have all the support." I hesitated, then laid it out. "I wake up before sunrise. I work weekends. I skip meals to buy textbooks. I've spent the last 4 years proving something to people who never bothered to ask what I was capable of." Lily stared at me, guilt plain on her face. "I had no idea," she whispered. "Mom and Dad always just said you were doing fine." "Fine is relative," I said. "I've worked 60-hour weeks while pulling straight A's. I built a company just to keep from drowning in loans. But none of that ever made me worth the kind of support they handed you by default." It wasn't angry, just honest, and it changed something between us. From that point on, Lily became more than the golden sister, she became my ally. She started turning down fancy gifts from home, saying she wanted to learn to manage things on her own. She even offered to cover groceries one week when she saw how tightly I was budgeting. I opened my coat, slid the paper inside, folded it, creased it down the center until it stopped. "That's not theft?" he asked. "No," I said. "That's reclamation." There was a long silence, then he spoke again, voice softer. "You know what scares me? Not what you did, but that I didn't ask. I let them change your name on paper like that would soften your past, and you let it happen." "No," I said. "I let you happen." He looked like I'd slapped him. Then, slowly, he walked to a drawer and pulled out a small folder. They wanted me to sign off on a photo for the mayor's wall, your deployment ceremony. I didn't, I said, but I kept this. He handed it to me. Inside was a print, me, bloodied but upright, flag patch torn, cradling a child in my arms amid rubble. My helmet hung loose, my eyes scanned the horizon. You looked like someone worth trusting, he said, even if I didn't know how. I slid the photo behind the altered certificate. If you ever want to tell the full story, I said, start with that one. I walked out before he could answer. Outside, Lena was sketching a dragon in front of a bookstore. It's breathing fire, she said proudly, into the sky, not at anyone. Why not at someone? I asked. Because sometimes you just want to be seen, she said. I ruffled her curls. Let's go. As we drove away, I didn't look back. Some buildings don't deserve second glances, and some legacies don't belong in frames, they belong in the hands of the ones who lived them. As I tucked the folded frame into my coat, a wind chime caught a sudden breeze. It sounded thin and brittle, like laughter that didn't quite reach the eyes. I turned once more to scan the back office. The same cracked mug sat on the desk, world's okayest dad, still visible beneath a coffee ring. A bitter smile flickered across my lips. I remembered the first time I'd stood in this office with scraped knees and a perfect spelling test, hoping he'd look up from his ledger and say something, anything. He hadn't. You know, he said quietly behind me, when you were little, you used to arrange the books by color. Took you hours. Customers hated it, but you let me. I let you because it was quiet, I said. You didn't ask for much. No, I replied. I learned early not to. He exhaled a soft sound, like something collapsing. You were always the brave one, he said. I turned to face him fully. Then why didn't you say that ever? He looked away. It scared me, what you became, the risks, the danger. I didn't know how to be proud without being afraid. I let that sit in the air, heavy and unfixable. That's not how pride works, I said finally. You feel it anyway, or you don't. He nodded slowly, not in agreement, just acknowledgement. Outside, Lena held up her dragon sketch. It's got medals now, she said. Because it's a hero. I looked at the wing she'd drawn, wide and fierce. You gave it stars. She nodded. It earned them. I buckled her into the truck and climbed in. For a long time I didn't start the engine. I just sat there, watching the bookstore through the windshield, its painted sign faded to the color of memory. What's wrong? Lena asked softly. Nothing, I said. Just wondering how long it takes a place to notice it's missing something important. She leaned her head against the seat. Maybe it never notices, but that doesn't mean you put it back. I looked at her, really looked. Her hand still smudged with crayon, her eyes too wise for 9. You're smarter than I was at your age, she said. Maybe, I said. But you were stronger, she corrected gently. I'm still here, she smiled. Then let's go be here somewhere better. I turned the key, the engine started, and we left that bookstore behind like a chapter that had nothing left to teach. In a Verstedt, the past doesn't stay shelved, especially not when it can be curated for charity. 2 days later, an envelope arrived at our motel, heavy stock, embossed seal, no return address. Inside, an invitation to the Isabel Rowe Foundation annual gala, a fundraiser. A photo of Isabel in a velvet gown, the tagline, celebrating women of grace. Below it, in smaller print, family encouraged to attend. Lena read it before I could tuck it away. Is she the one with the shiny shoes? She asked. Yes, I said. Are we going? I paused. The answer should have been no, but Lena whispered, it says family, and for her sake, I couldn't pretend the word had lost all meaning. The country club wore wealth-like costume jewelry, obvious, overdone, slightly tarnished. Valets avoided eye contact. The host scanned the list and offered a clipped smile. Ah, General Rowe and guest, daughter? I corrected him, she's my daughter. He handed us the seating card without apology, table 17, near the restrooms, between swinging doors and strategic obscurity. Lena squeezed my hand. This table smells like lemon cleaner, that's how they scrub out discomfort, I muttered. From our vantage point, we could see the back of the stage and the backs of heads. Center spotlight, Isabel in silver chiffon, backlit like a beatified martyr. The screen behind her played a highlight reel, rescued women smiling, interns, ribbon cuttings. Not one mention of Kabul or Kandahar or me. Then the MC, polished and saccharine, stepped up. Isabel Rowe is more than a philanthropist, she's the embodiment of grace, reborn from family shadows. Applause. She turned a complicated name into a crown of courage. Another round of clapping. Lena leaned in. That's a lot of talking for not saying anything. That's politics, I said. You bury truth under polish. Dessert came, a dollop of lemon foam and a raspberry. I excused myself, old instincts rising. I didn't look like a threat in a cocktail dress, but I was one. Behind the stage, velvet curtains hung like secrets. I moved silently, breath measured, then heard voices. She brought the kid, let her. It makes her look unhinged, like she's chasing relevance, one scoffed. You think she'll speak? If she does, we have the letter, Kandahar, her signature on it. My blood iced. My letter. One leaked to the right outlet, and she's not a hero, she's an unhinged officer who disobeyed chain of command. Frame it right, she's a liability, not a legacy. Something heavy pressed into my chest. My hand shook, not with fear, but with fury. I stepped back into shadow, leaned against a utility closet, trying to slow my breath. It wasn't the letter that threatened me, it was their version of it. Back at the table, Lena had drawn a new picture, a ballroom swallowed by a dragon's flame. That's you, she said. You're the fire, I'm the wings. I almost laughed, almost cried. Good. Stay close, we fly soon. We didn't stay for the closing speech. On the way out, a young assistant offered a glossy gift bag. I looked inside, lipstick, a donation form, and a card that read, "Thank you for supporting women who rise." I left it on the nearest table. We had already risen, without their permission. Outside, the night was cool, the stars unbothered by the pretenses inside. Are we in trouble? Lena asked. No, I said, but they might be. Why? Because they forgot the most dangerous person in any war. I looked down at her, smiled, is the one who knows how the story really ends. Behind us, somewhere inside that golden cage, a curtain stirred, and a carefully constructed legacy took its first invisible crack. 2 days later, Lena and I walked downtown, past the post office and the bakery with the crooked welcome mat, toward a shopfront I hadn't noticed before. The windows gleamed with curated reverence, gold trim, soft lighting, and a sign etched in cursive script. The Isabel Rowe Center for Women's Empowerment. Lena tugged at my sleeve. Look, she said, pointing at the glass. That's your medal. I froze. There, framed behind the spotless pane, was a replica of the Silver Valor Cross, my Silver Valor Cross, except it wasn't labeled mine. The placard beneath read, In honor of heroic service abroad. Donated by the Rowe family to inspire future leaders. No name. No unit. No truth, just a hollow symbol neatly staged for photo ops and board meetings. I stared at it for a long moment. Lena asked softly, "Is that yours?" "It was," I said, "but now it's been repurposed, scrubbed of blood and story, polished into palatability." Next to the medal was a looping video. Isabel shaking hands with senators, smiling at ribbon cuttings, holding toddlers in disaster zones she'd never set foot in. A voiceover narrated in syrupy tones. At the heart of courage lies compassion, and no one exemplifies this more than Isabel Rowe. My stomach turned. She hadn't just borrowed my bloodline, she'd borrowed my battlefield. I stepped closer to the glass. My reflection merged with the metal. For a second, it looked like I was wearing it again, but it didn't feel like honor. It felt like erasure. "Can we go inside?" Lena asked. I hesitated, then nodded. A receptionist greeted us with forced warmth, trained to scan for donations, not dignity. The lobby smelled like new paint and lavender. We wandered through the exhibit hall, a curated maze of plaques, portraits, and soft lighting. I looked at him, really looked, and saw the denial, the discomfort, the desperate grasp for control. "I haven't been hiding anything," I said calmly. "You just weren't paying attention." There was a long pause. Lily joined me, wrapping her arm around my shoulders. Her voice was louder than usual, loud enough that nearby families could hear. "Everyone's been talking about Emma's speech," she said proudly. "It's amazing what she managed to accomplish without any support. I wonder how much more she could have done if she had the same resources I did." Our mother flinched visibly, the words hitting harder than a scream from behind them. Uncle Jack and Aunt Susan exchanged glances. I could feel the weight of judgment shifting in the room, not toward me, but toward them, toward the parents who'd ignored, dismissed, underestimated. Dad cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should talk more at the house," he muttered. "Actually," I said, "I have a celebration with my business team and my professors this afternoon, the people who actually supported me through college." That hit hard. Before they could say anything else, Grandma Eleanor stepped in and took my hand. "I'm coming with you," she declared. "I want to meet the people who believed in my granddaughter when her own parents didn't." The sentence landed like a thunderclap. Mom opened her mouth, maybe to apologize, maybe to protest, but nothing came out. Then Lily spoke up. "I'm coming, too." She stepped away from them and toward us. I turned. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "I want to be with the people who saw your worth. It's time." And just like that, the three of us, me, my grandmother, and my sister, walked away, leaving behind the people who had failed to see the value standing in front of them all along. We didn't look back at the business school reception. Everything was different, light, joyful, full of laughter and pride. Faculty came up to me one after the other, congratulating me, asking about my plans, thanking me for what I'd shared. Zoe found us and immediately wrapped me in a giant hug. "You did it," she whispered in my ear. "You freaking did it." "I had help," I said, glancing at her, then at Grandma and Lily. I introduced them both to every professor, every mentor, every classmate who'd stood by me over the last 4 years. Professor Bennett gave me the biggest surprise. "We've received an inquiry from Business Innovation magazine," she said. "They want to feature your story, and they asked for a photo with your family." My heart stopped for half a second. "They mean my actual family, right?" She smiled knowingly. "Yes, the one that believed in you." We posed together, me in the center, Grandma Eleanor on one side, Lily on the other, all three of us beaming. Later that evening, I got a text from Mom. "Family dinner at the rental house, hope you'll join. We want to celebrate you, too." I showed the message to Lily and Grandma. "What do you think?" I asked. Grandma raised an eyebrow. "Bit late to start acting proud, don't you think?" Lily shrugged. "Maybe. But I do want to see Uncle Jack roast them again." We all laughed, and for the first time in a long time, I laughed without bitterness. I was proud of what I'd done, of who I'd become, not in spite of my family, but because I had learned how to become my own biggest believer. Whatever happened next, it wouldn't change that. Later that evening, we pulled up to the rental house my parents had booked for the weekend. It looked just like the kind of place they loved: immaculate landscaping, upscale furniture, a showpiece for appearances. It screamed success, just not the kind they'd expected to be celebrating. As we walked in, me, Lily, and Grandma, conversations hushed, then, like someone unpaused the room, people started coming over. Cousins I barely spoke to hugged me. Aunts and uncles offered congratulations. Even a few distant relatives whose names I could barely recall handed me business cards. "Your speech was unforgettable," one of them said. "My daughter's a freshman here. I hope she hears your story." I thanked them, but part of me couldn't ignore the stares coming from across the room. My parents stood there, watching everything unfold, clearly unprepared for how much had shifted in just one day. Mom emerged from the kitchen wearing her best hostess smile, but her eyes looked uncertain. "Emma, you came," she said, her voice a bit too high, too rehearsed. "We're just about to serve dinner." Dad followed with his usual boisterous tone that always felt like a mask. "There's my successful daughter," he said loudly enough for the whole room to hear. "Emma, why didn't you tell us about your job at Alexander Global?" The question landed like a joke without a punchline. I looked at him and replied evenly, "Maybe because you never asked." There was a brief silence, not dramatic, just revealing, the kind of silence where people start to question what they've always believed. Uncle Jack chimed in before the tension could break. "Probably because you haven't asked about her once in 4 years, Robert," he said, casually sipping his drink, "at least not at any dinner I've been at." Dad's face flushed. "That's not fair. We've always supported both our girls," Aunt Susan raised an eyebrow. "Financially," she added, because the university president was pretty clear about Emma putting herself through school. Mom jumped in quickly. "We had limited resources. We made hard choices." Grandma Eleanor stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Emma didn't choose independence. She accepted it because you left her no other option. Let's not rewrite history now that the cameras are pointing her way." That stopped them cold. Then the moment that truly shifted everything, Lily stepped forward. "Mom, Dad, I think it's time we just say the truth." Her voice wasn't angry. It was steady, almost gentle. "You favored me. You gave me everything. You assumed Emma didn't need support just because she didn't complain, and you were wrong." The room was so still you could have heard a fork drop. "I didn't even know half of what she'd been through until this year, and I was living 10 minutes away from her," she continued. "You made her fight for everything on her own while I coasted." Tears welled in Mom's eyes, whether from guilt or being called out in front of family, I couldn't tell. "We never meant to," she whispered. "We just thought Emma was doing fine." I stepped in then. "Intentions don't erase impact. You made a choice, and that choice made my path harder than it needed to be." Dad's voice cracked slightly. "We were trying to do what we thought was best, and what you thought was best," he said, "was betting on the daughter who fit your idea of success, not the one building it from scratch. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like truth, and for the first time in my life, I said it all without rage or tears, just clarity. Dinner continued, but the energy was different now. People saw me not as Emma who works too much or Emma who keeps her head down, but as Emma, the one who built an empire in silence. Cousins asked me about my business model. Aunt Susan asked if I'd mentor her daughter. Even my grandparents, who'd never really known much about what I did, said they were proud. Every time someone said, "You're so impressive," I could see my parents shrink just a little more, realizing that the daughter they doubted had become the person others admired most. Toward the end of the evening, after cake and quiet conversations, my father approached me near the back deck, away from the crowd. "We've been talking," he said, his voice lower now, more measured, "and we'd like to help with the deposit on an apartment near your new job. Consider it a graduation gift." The offer was well-meaning, I suppose, but also far too little, way too late. "I appreciate that," I replied, keeping my tone polite, "but I don't need it. My starting salary is $90,000, plus bonuses. My housing is already squared away." He blinked like he'd misheard. "90,000, he asked. I'd never said it out loud to them before. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. He looked stunned. He started. "You don't need to say anything," I cut in gently. "You don't owe me now. You owed me then. I'm okay without it. I always was." He nodded once. That was the closest to an apology I was going to get from him, from now on. On our way out, Lily turned to me. "Grandma and I are doing a little weekend at the lake house before I move to my new place. You should come." Her eyes were warm, real, just us three. A reset, like a family vacation with the actual family. I didn't even hesitate. "I'd love that." As we walked toward the car, me, Lily, and Grandma, I took one last glance back at the rental house. My parents stood near the doorway, still surrounded by guests but noticeably alone. Their carefully curated narrative was crumbling, and they knew it. The story they'd always told about the perfect daughter, the safe investment, had been rewritten publicly, irrevocably, and I hadn't needed their help to do it. The next morning, we were back at Grandma Eleanor's lake house, the place that had been my escape for so many years. But this time it didn't feel like I was running away from anything. It felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The three of us, me, Lily, and Grandma, sat on the back porch, sipping coffee and watching the early morning fog lift off the lake. It was quiet, peaceful, no tension, no passive-aggressive silences, no pretending. Lily leaned back in her chair, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "I still can't believe yesterday," she said, half laughing. "You got a scholarship named after you, a scholarship, Emma, at our university." I smiled, but it hadn't fully sunken yet. "It still feels surreal," I admitted. "Like I'm living in two versions of reality, one where I was invisible and one where people finally saw me." "They didn't just see you," Grandma said. "They stood for you, the entire room." And I realized that's what had truly changed. I wasn't fighting alone anymore. Over the next few days, something shifted even more deeply between Lily and me. We weren't just sisters in proximity, we were rebuilding something that had been missing our whole lives. We cooked dinner together, learning each other's rhythms from scratch. We went through old family photo albums, laughing at our horrible haircuts and awkward phases. When Lily finally cried, really cried, about how much guilt she felt for not seeing what I'd been through, I held her hand and said, "You weren't supposed to know. They kept you in the light and kept me in the shadows. That wasn't your fault." "Either," she said, "I liked being the favorite too much." She was owning it, not out of shame, but because she wanted to be better, and I respected the hell out of that. A few weeks later, I moved into my new apartment just 10 minutes from Alexander Global's downtown office tower. It was modern, filled with light, and fully furnished, thanks to a portion of the prize money from the business competition. Zoe helped me unpack. "Look at you," she said, holding up a framed photo of us from freshman year. "From ramen and broken lamps to this." She paused. "You ever think about how different things could have been if your parents had supported you from day one?" I looked around at my space, the polished concrete floors, the clean desk where I'd already set up my second monitor for remote business meetings, the vision board pinned neatly above it all, and then I shook my head. "No," I said, "because I wouldn't trade who I became for any of it." That fall, my feature in Business Innovation magazine hit the shelves. My story was on the cover: Emma Wilson, Grit, Grind, and the Rise of a Relentless Entrepreneur. It wasn't just about recognition, it was about reclaiming my story. The piece detailed how I'd bootstrapped my way through college, founded a six-figure business, and landed a top-tier consulting job, all while being completely unsupported by my family. I mailed signed copies to Professor Bennett, Dean Rodriguez, and Mrs. Chen. I even sent one to the financial aid office addressed to Ms. Winters with a note that read, "Thank you for seeing me before the world did." I didn't send a copy to my parents, but they found it anyway. 2 weeks after the magazine dropped, they invited me to lunch at a neutral, public location, a white tablecloth place they'd taken Lily to before. When I arrived, I noticed how dressed up they were, Mom in pearls, Dad in a blazer, both looking like they were trying very hard not to look like they were trying. "We've been talking a lot since graduation," Mom said once we'd ordered. "And we want to start over, if that's even possible." I didn't respond right away, because the truth was, I wasn't sure. Part of me wanted to ask where this empathy had been when I was applying for loans, where the pride was when I was collapsing from exhaustion in my dorm, where the love was when I walked into my future completely alone. But I also knew holding on to that pain would only drag me backward. "I'm open to trying," I said carefully, "but it has to be different. I'm not the version of Emma you remember. I'm not the girl waiting for approval anymore." Dad shifted awkwardly, then said, "You've become someone we never imagined, and we're proud, even if it's late." That was probably the closest I'd ever get to a real apology from him, and honestly, it was enough for now, because I didn't need it anymore. Over the next few months, I threw myself into my new job. The learning curve was steep, but I was used to steep. The hours were long, but I knew how to grind. Alexander Global valued my real-world experience more than my GPA. They didn't care where I came from, only what I brought to the table, and I brought fire. Meanwhile, I kept my business going. My student team continued managing client accounts with professionalism, and I rotated in for major projects. We rebranded as a digital strategy agency and began pitching to companies outside Michigan. Profits climbed, the team grew, and by winter I paid off one of my smaller student loans in full. The best part? I was now in a position to pay it forward. At the 1-year anniversary of my graduation, I launched the first-gen achievement fund at Westfield. Unlike traditional merit-based scholarships, this one didn't just reward grades, it rewarded grit. I told the university committee, "Look at what these students have overcome, not just what they've accomplished." The first recipient, a young woman juggling 2 jobs, caring for her siblings, and majoring in accounting, reminded me of who I was just a few years earlier. She didn't know it yet, but she was going to change her life just like I did. The scholarship launch was a small ceremony tucked into the Westfield Business Building's atrium, but it meant more to me than any trophy or check I'd ever received. The room was filled with familiar faces. Professor Bennett, Dean Rodriguez, Ms. Winters, even Zoe had taken off work to attend. Grandma Eleanor, elegant as ever in her soft blue dress, held onto my arm as we stepped up to the mic together. This scholarship, I said, addressing the crowd, is not just for students who ace every test or win every competition. It's for the ones who keep showing up, who keep pushing forward even when no one claps for them. This is for the ones who work 2 jobs, take care of siblings, skip meals, and still show up to class on time. I see you, because I was you. When I looked out into the crowd, I noticed something unexpected, my parents sitting quietly in the back. They weren't front and center this time, no suits, no pearls, just quiet presence. Afterwards, as I mingled with the guests, they came up to me slowly. "We're proud of you," Mom said, her voice gentler than I'd heard it in years. "Not because of the success, though it's impressive, but because of the way you've used it to help others." Dad nodded, more reserved. "You've become someone who doesn't just overcome obstacles, you help others climb over them too." They were trying, and this time, not for an audience, just for me. I didn't fully trust them yet, but I also didn't need to punish them to feel powerful. That wasn't who I wanted to be. So I accepted the moment for what it was, a step. Later that evening, Lily and I sat by the lake again, wrapped in blankets, hot chocolate in hand. "I've been thinking about that question," she said softly. "What question?" I asked. "If you'll ever forgive them." It hung in the air between us like a drifting ember from our memories. "I don't know," I said after a moment. Forgiveness isn't one decision, it's a lot of little ones, every day. Right now, I'm not holding the pain anymore. I'm letting it be part of my story, but not the weight in my backpack. Lily nodded slowly. "I just want to say again, I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I'm sorry I never asked." "You're asking now," I said simply. "That matters." Our sisterhood wasn't perfect, but it was real now, and honest, and we were building it brick by brick. In the months that followed, I continued growing my business while excelling at Alexander Global. By spring, I was promoted to strategy associate, a jump that usually took 2 years. My boss, Jennifer Alexander herself, called me into her office one afternoon with a smirk. "You've got something most people never develop," she said. "Execution under pressure, that's not teachable. That's earned." I smiled. "Diamonds are made under pressure, right?" She laughed. "I'll have that embroidered on your office chair." Meanwhile, Lily had taken a job with a nonprofit focused on educational access. One night over dinner, she told me she'd been inspired by the First Gen Fund. "I want to help people like you," she said. "People who just needed someone to believe in them." Grandma Eleanor stayed involved with the scholarship too, meeting recipients, writing letters of encouragement, even mentoring a few students in her spare time. One Sunday afternoon, while we sat in her cozy sunroom, she handed me a small velvet pouch. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet. "This was from my grandmother," she said. "She gave it to me when I graduated and told me, a woman's worth doesn't come from what others give her. It comes from what she knows she's worth." I've been holding on to it for the one granddaughter who would understand that. She fastened it around my wrist with shaking hands. "You were always worthy," she said softly. "They just didn't see it, but you did. That's what matters." I thought about that a lot in the weeks to come, how my parents' limited vision of me wasn't about me, it was about them. Their failure to believe didn't make me less, it just made their view smaller. Maybe that's the most powerful truth of all, other people's opinions don't define you. Your value doesn't shrink because someone else fails to recognize it. Being underestimated isn't a curse, sometimes it's the catalyst. Because when no one's cheering, you learn how to clap for yourself. When no one's helping, you learn how to build from scratch. And when the applause finally comes, It's not the sound that fulfills you, it's the knowledge that you never needed it in the first place. 1 year after graduation, I stood at the front of a packed lecture hall at Westfield University, not as a student, but as a guest speaker. The topic was resilience and entrepreneurship. My audience, a new class of first-year business students. Some of them had probably just gotten their first loan statements, others looked overwhelmed just thinking about balancing classes and part-time jobs. I saw a younger version of myself in so many of their faces. I opened with a story, not about the scholarship, not about Alexander Global, not even about the business competition. I told them about the time I opened that acceptance letter to Westfield and looked up to see my dad still scrolling on his phone. I told them about packing my life into used grocery store boxes while my sister had professional movers. And then I told them this: you don't have to start from privilege to end up powerful. A girl came up to me with tears in her eyes. My parents didn't want me to go to college, she said. They said it was a waste for someone like me. But now I think maybe I'll prove them wrong too. That was the moment I realized my story wasn't just about proving something to my parents, it had become about helping others prove something to themselves. I wasn't just succeeding, I was turning pain into purpose. Over the next few months, I expanded my digital agency into a full-fledged consulting collective, partnering with local colleges to train students in real-world client work. I offered paid internships, mentorship, flexible scheduling, all the things I had needed but never had. My first hire from the First Gen Fund was a sophomore named Lexi. She reminded me so much of myself. It was eerie, sharp, resourceful, a little tired but deeply driven. Watching her thrive, watching her confidence grow, it was like giving my younger self the shot I never got. One afternoon, while reviewing a pitch deck she'd built, she looked at me and said, "How did you do all this without anyone backing you up?" I paused for a moment before answering. I stopped waiting for someone to hand me permission. I gave it to myself. And that became the core of every talk I gave, every mentorship I offered, every scholarship I awarded. Don't wait for someone to invest in you, become your own investor. Around that time, Lily called me with exciting news. She'd been offered a promotion at the nonprofit and was now overseeing a program focused on first-gen college students. "I finally feel like I'm doing something real," she said. "You are," I told her. "You've come a long way," she replied, "and in case I haven't said it enough, I'm proud to be your sister." It took years to get here, but that moment made the struggle worth it. Even my relationship with my parents, while still complicated, began to soften. They invited me to dinner, not just for appearances but to talk, to listen, to learn. They even asked about my work, about the scholarship, about what it really took to build what I had. One night, Dad surprised me. "I see now that I missed a lot," he said. "I judged your potential through the wrong lens. I'm sorry. It wasn't everything, but it was something, and for me, that was enough to keep the door open. Not because I needed their approval anymore, but because growth, like forgiveness, doesn't always come all at once. Sometimes it arrives in steps, in awkward conversations, in moments when people finally try, even if they're late. I chose to meet them halfway, but I never lost sight of who I was without them. Because here's the truth, I didn't need to be chosen to become successful. I didn't need to be believed in to believe in myself. I didn't need a spotlight to shine. If you're still watching, if you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever felt like the backup plan in someone else's life story, let me tell you something I wish someone had told me years ago: your value isn't negotiable. It doesn't increase when people finally see it, and it doesn't disappear when they don't. The journey to becoming everything they never expected you to be is hard, it's lonely, it's uphill. But when you get there, the view is yours. So don't chase approval. Don't beg for belief. Build anyway. shine anyway. And when they finally look up and realize who you are, when they finally see what you've built, let them wonder how they missed it for so long, and smile, because you never needed them to see it to make it real. You were enough from the very beginning. Thanks for watching, and if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, comment, and share. Remember, sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't revenge at all, it's becoming exactly who they never saw coming. I'll see you in the next one.